Hey, welcome to our live stream here on YouTube. We are Stan and Alicia Moulton from the Honey Company. We're here in Spring City, Utah, and we're so excited to be here tonight and to talk about bees.
Welcome. Thanks again for joining us. We're doing this every week. So if you're tuning in again from last week, we've got some more quiz questions for you coming up. And we're going to give you a current status of the bees in this weather. And we're also going to talk about some hive modifications. And we are going to mention some of the concerns that beginning beekeepers have as the package bee and nukes season is rapidly approaching.
Yep. So this is the fourth class in a 5-part class series. So if you missed the first ones, February 1st, we talked about how to choose your first colony and equipment. On February 8th, we talked about what's in a hive, like things like honeybee casts and what do bees collect and add to the hive. Our third class was on February 15th, and it talked about how does my colony grow and reproduce over time? So we talked about the birds and the bees a little bit. And then tonight we're going to talk about setting up your apiary. Next week, February 29th, we're going to talk about how to manage your colony, like your new colony. So we're going to talk about specific management strategies for packages and nucleus colonies, and maybe get into a little bit of what to look for in your first spring inspections. So welcome. If you're joining us, we'd love for you to comment and tell us where you're from. And we'd love to, hear from you and make this your meeting instead of just us saying stuff. Okay. So a couple things is, first thing, we've got a couple questions that were people that watched the video maybe after it was recorded live, and they sent in some questions for us. So I thought we would start off by asking those questions and then move through those. So I'm going to ask him to Stan and he's going to answer. Will that work?
Sounds good. Way we go.
Okay. So this first question comes from Matthew, and he's in Utah, and he said, Stan, are your queens coming from your feral breed stock, or are they coming from a California supplier? And then do you only deliver in Provo?
We will have queen bees, our package bees. Those are going to be California queens. The queens in our nukes are going to be from our feral bee project. So we will have some of both. Depends on how you're buying bees. The queen bees that we'll get in the packages, I say California queens because they're going to be mixed. They're going to be a variety. They'll be crossed between carniones. Specifically, if you want to look these things up, New World carnion and the golden Italian. So there'll be a variety of colors there. So it's fun to learn about the different varieties of bees out there. Just like looking through that catalog full of all the different 200 kinds of chickens, you learn about their history and
the
different things, and the seed catalogs, and all the different kinds of apples they have. So, but in reality, we don't really have purebred bees anymore. We have some that are close, but the thing that you want, I would encourage you not to get too hung up on a specific variety of bees. We like the bees that are alive. The kind that are alive, those are the kinds we want. And if they're nice, that's great for our backyard customers too. So other than that, whether one makes a little more honey or not, we would like to have all those character traits that we want in a specific variety of bees, but we're happy to settle right now for bees that are alive. That's the kind we're going to have.
So just to answer specifically, maybe you said this already, but in our package bees, which come in April, like the second week of April, usually, those ones are coming with packages. We're going to buy some queens from our supplier in California, and he's going to send them with the packages, and we sell queens that way. And then if you wait a little later in the season, then we'll start raising our own queens, and it's warm enough to do that probably the end of May. Typically, we don't know what the weather's going to do, but that's generally the pattern that our year follows. So we can sell you some feral queens in our nucleus colonies, and then also just as individual queens. Did you already say that, or maybe I missed that?
Sort of. All right.
Okay. Thanks for. All right. And then we had a new question just come in from Brian, and he says, what do you guys think about double deep frames? Only 10 frames and 2 double deep boxes.
Let's see. We brought in with us a variety of frames today to show people. I made one of those. It was an attempt at doing some bee art. That's not a bad idea for the bees. Here's the trouble. Those bees will stick that frame down. Remember, if they put propolis all the way down that sidebar, the end bar of that frame, it's going to be really hard for you to get it out. And it's going to be really heavy when it comes out of there. That's a lot of weight if it's full of honey. So if you put it in the brood box, well, even if it's just got brood in it too, that's going to be a heavy, really heavy frame. So you can get a frame that's too big for you to manage. So the great thing about frames, thanks to Lorenzo Langstroth, is that he made them movable and removable. So most people, if they're going to vary from the standard Langstroth size of a frame, they like to go shallower. Mm-hmm. So I don't. I like bigger frames. In fact, I'll tell you what I was currently doing today while we're on the subject of frames. I'm building a Layens hive, and that has a frame that's larger than the standard Langstroth deep. It's not quite as big as a double deep frame would be, but still it's considerably longer. And then also we will have on this podcast too, coming up soon, as soon as we got a little more daylight in the evenings, we'll be showing you a hive that we have just right outside our window here. And it's in a jumbo. So that's 2 inches deeper than the regular deep Langstroth frame. So I do like deep frames. I'm always thinking about how I can make a bigger frame. So I'm reluctant to go with a double deep frame though, just because of the size and the weight. I think it's getting a little bit too big. It's pushing the boundaries a little bit. So, but having said that, I do have some experience with that kind of thing. I don't want to sound like I'm discouraging you. I would try it. I would do something like that if you are inclined. So the great thing about that is that you could mix them. You don't have to put a double deep frame in all the boxes. You could try a few of them, just see what happens. And then the rest in that same box, in the same hive, could be single. So try 1 or 2 to start with, see if you like it or not, see what the bees say. You got to run that one by the bees, Brian. That's the thing to do.
Okay, so just for those who don't know, this is a deep frame, and this behind it is a jumbo frame. So it's even deeper. That's what he's talking about when he says jumbo.
I like that size of frame. So the reason that I don't do more of that stuff is because we've got to load the bees and move them frequently, take them to California, move them around all different places. Mm-hmm. So we standardized with the rest of the industry, mm-hmm. right? But if you're not moving your bees much, that jumbo box would be a great thing. Let's say if a guy were making just honeycomb, you could put your bees in have the jumbo size or a modified Dadant size for your brood box, and then just put your shallow honeycomb on there. If you're raising for cut comb or for using Ross rounds or sections or hog half combs, that kind of thing, that'd go great with a little bit bigger brood nest and a shallow on top. Anyway, there's lots of different ways to manage that. I would try it.
Yep. Try it. You can configure your hive a lot of different ways.
Yep.
Okay. So if you're just joining us, feel free to ask questions in the comments and we'll try to answer them. And also, just for those who are just joining us, we're going to talk about setting up your apiary. But first, we're going to go through some questions that people sent in between now and the last video that we did. Okay. So this one is going to kind of get cut off, but excuse me. Liz says, I will need to transport the bees So she bought a nucleus colony and she needs to transport the bees in the back of her SUV. She doesn't have access to a pickup, and she planned on coming with the hive box with the 5-frame space. So what we have people do is they purchase their nukes, they move the frame of the nucleus colony into their box. We like people to look through their frames and just see what they're getting before they take it home in case something's not right, and then we can correct it right on the spot. And then she said she's coming with her hive and her lid and her bottom board. And she said, what do you recommend to keep the box closed? And she asks if cinch straps would work.
Sure. Yeah, any kind of straps work to keep it closed. So, we've got anything from ratchet straps to duct tape. We can nail it down. People used to just nail the thing down. You know that little hole in the end of your hive tool? It's a nail puller. That's what that thing's for. They used to just nail the hive down so the bees couldn't get out while they're being moved, and then you'd pull the nails back out. So
bungee cords can also
work. Sure.
Mm-hmm. A rope, anything. So we secure the lid and the bottom board to the box as people are driving those nucleus colonies home, so that they don't tip over, and because the bees haven't, of course, they're brand new to the box. So they haven't had time to create a propolis seal, so they're extra movable. Yeah. Okay. So another question is, someone said, thank you so much for letting us know that the smoker metal disc has legs. That's probably why, or at least one of the reasons, my smoker just tends to not get going well. Okay.
Little details, you got to know those things.
Yep. Okay. Another question is, if my foundation does not have the cutout corners at the bottom, like the communication holes, what we talked about in week 1, can you just use kitchen scissors to cut them? So I'm going to show you what I mean. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, I have here a frame, and when we install the foundation, this is a piece of plastic foundation in this wooden frame. And when we install them, we like to add communication holes here. This is what bees naturally do in the bottom corners of their comb. And so this is just the sheet of that plastic foundation. And these are my kitchen scissors. So I'm going to show you okay. So what I'm trying to say here, I'm not cutting it correctly, but I'm just going to say that these kitchen scissors, their Cutco scissors, are really nice. It's hard to do, but it's possible. So that answers that question.
I cut them on my saw out in the shop. 10 or 15 at a time. Scissors will work. A knife will work. Just anything you can cut that plastic with.
Mm-hmm. And then some brands of foundation actually come with like a perforated corner here that you can just kind of wiggle back and forth and break off that way. They come ready to remove those communication holes. So just a little detail, but these go at the bottom of the frame. Bees just like to be able to move from frame to frame within the hive through those holes.
Right.
Okay.
So if you were to put wax in there instead of plastic foundation, and that wax was square all the way to the bottom corner, the bees naturally like to chew a hole through there. Here's some wax foundation. So if you're going to use wax foundation, and then most of the bee supplies places still sell it, lots of people still use it. You want a frame wire, so you'll have to wire your frames. There's a little bit more labor involved. So here's an old frame back before plastic foundation was real popular. Mm-hmm. So
I'm just getting a sheet of paper so you can see the wires on camera.
Yeah. So when you put the wax foundation in there, there's a couple of different tools that you have to embed it. So you'll have to put that on the wax. There'll be the wax like that. And then you'll run a little thing across those wires, and it squishes the wire into the wax. And
so like a roller tool?
Yeah, there's several different ways to do that. But naturally, the bees, even though that corner is waxed on there, the bees will chew a hole through that bottom corner so they can crawl from one frame to the next. So now remember, there's bee space right around the bottom of it and right around the bottom end of it. So they could just crawl around, but for some reason, that's what they like to do. They like to have the hole right there in that corner to crawl through. So we call those communication holes. So when we use a wax foundation, we would just naturally cut that corner off just because that's what the bees want. So let me give you another example here. So like on this foundationless frame, I don't know if you can see here, but there's a few holes. There's a hole right here that the bees have naturally left. They can crawl through. There's one here on the corner that the bees will crawl through there. So if you were to give them a frame that's foundationless, they naturally want to have a few holes in there. This is what the bees want, and it makes good sense too, especially this time of year. They're in a really tight cluster, and for them to go from one frame of honey over to the next frame easily, it would help if they had a couple of holes right in the middle of the frame. So rather than being trapped, let's say they're in a corner and it's too cold for them to crawl down and around the frame through the communication holes in the bottom, it'd be nice for them to crawl right through. It helps them to cluster. So that's enough of that.
And of course, this hole right here is one that we cut out. We cut out a chunk of comb there. Yeah. So that's not something the bees created. That was like a solid comb, but these smaller holes here are kind of what he's talking about.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So the next question, this actually leads really well into the next one, is what are the benefits of alternating? So on the first, let's see, the first episode of this live stream, I guess, first class or whatever, we talked about if you're using foundationless frames, that we can alternate a foundationless frame and then a frame with foundation in a brand new hive. And so she's asking about that. What's the benefit of alternating foundation with foundationless frames? And why not use all foundation frames? So I can start on that, but there's people have different opinions about what they want to use in their hives. I'm getting a lot of phone calls and stuff. People have different opinions about what they want in their hives. Some people want this. This is probably the easiest way is to use a frame with plastic foundation. It's really easy to manage this kind of frame. Some people prefer not to have plastic in their frame. Plastic in their hives, and so when they do that, then they'll either switch to wax foundation or they can switch to foundationless frames and have the bees build everything. And it just depends on, I guess, how crunchy you are. So if you want these plastic sheets are sprayed with a thin layer of beeswax, and that beeswax comes from someone else's hive, probably a commercial hive that's been treated with treatments, and maybe the bees have been exposed to some pesticides. So if you want the cleanest start, then you could start with something like this, an empty frame, and just have the bees build all of their comb. So these are kind of two ends of the spectrum. We could do plastic foundation, we can do foundationless, and have them do everything using wax foundation that's kind of somewhere in the middle. Do you want to take over this? But plastic foundations are probably the easiest for the beekeeper to manage.
Bees like to hook the ends when they're going to attach the end of a comb to the inside of whatever it is, whether they're in a hollow log or in a beehive. If they have the space, they kind of turn it. They'll make kind of an S shape, or they'll even just build cross comb. They'll ignore the direction that we asked them to build in. Mm-hmm. And so that's the purpose for putting every other frame with foundation and then foundationless. So a starter strip. Did you mention starter strips?
I did not mention.
So if you had a foundationless frame, you could put on the top. Most of the frames will come with a grooved top bar in here. You can put some popsicle sticks on there. So the way I build my frames, I've got a chamfer in them. It's an angle right there, so it creates a little bit sharper edge right in the middle that would encourage the bees to build along that line. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the bees just build going the other direction. So, so there's starter strips in various different sizes and shapes. If you put just a frame in with no starter strip and it's in between two already drawn comb, pretty much they'll build straight every time.
Yeah. So, and just as a quick visual, like if we have a whole box full of foundationless frames, Stan, the bees, we want them to build this way so that the comb is parallel to the frame, but sometimes they go rogue and they go this way. And so if there's a comb that's across all of those frames, then when you try to lift a frame out of the box, of course it won't come out because it's jammed in there. So if we alternate foundationless and foundation frames, just like Stan says, that won't happen. But you don't have to mess with that at all if that's not your thing. You can just use foundation frames and then not worry about having to mess with that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Another question is, it looks like most folks are using plastic foundation. Why do they move away from the pure beeswax foundation? So I think, do we kind of answer that?
I guess we did. There's still more details about it too. When it comes to extracting, that's another reason it's a little sturdier. So once the bees have built comb on the wax foundation, after a year or so, it's a little bit harder. And especially if they've raised some brood in it, then it really stands up well in a centrifuge extractor. So, but plastic frames is a lot more sturdier. You don't have to do wires. That's a labor saving thing if you've got lots of hives. If you've got only one colony and you only have to wire up, a few boxes worth of frames, then no big deal. But if you're a commercial beekeeper, it would take forever and ever to use wax foundation anymore with the wires and how you embed them. So
most people don't use wires anymore.
Nope, it's still available. It's still in the catalog, so you can still do it if you want. They like pure wax. That's what the bees prefer. Bees are okay with plastic too, especially if it's coated, but they'll go to work faster on wax foundation than they will on plastic. So we come to a happy agreement on both sides, I guess. It's easier for the beekeeper to use plastic foundation, and the bees will at least tolerate it and do fairly well with it. So that's the way it's going.
Yep. Stan's mom grew up in the era of wiring bee frames, so she used to tell stories about all of her siblings sitting there wiring frames.
Yep.
She's like, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. After you do thousands of those, you've done enough.
Yep. Anyway, okay. So another question is, when using plastic foundation for Utah or wherever, does it matter if I use black plastic or natural plastic foundation?
The bees don't care. It's easier to see eggs and really young larvae with the black background because the eggs are white and the larvae are white. And so the people will say, oh, my queens love the black stuff better. No, it's just because you can see where she's been easier on the black. It doesn't matter to the bees. So it's dark inside the hive anyway. How would they know?
And then with the lighter foundation, you can see the color of the wax. And so if one of your management strategies is to cull dark wax comb, to remove some of the disease spores and pesticide residue that can build up in old comb, you can prevent some beekeeping diseases some honeybee diseases by removing that dark comb. And so that's easier to see on light foundation, but you can still see eggs in light foundation, and you can still see comb color on dark foundation, and it's just a personal preference. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see honey color better too with lighter colored foundation. Right. So that may be important, may not. I mean, the honey you get's the honey you're going to get, whatever color it is. But it might be nice to know if you're going for a single source honey, you want to keep the lavender honey separate from the clover, or you get the idea.
Yeah. Okay. So it's up to you. Buy the color you like. Yeah. Okay. So then we can say, what is your favorite post-sting treatment? So I think I have an answer for you. His favorite treatment is to just tough it out. And he's like, it's not a big deal. It gets stung every day, whatever, right? When our kids get stung or when a neighbor or something gets stung and we want to help them out, some things that we try are like lavender essential oil. That is pretty effective on a bee sting. Get the stinger out quickly. It's a good idea if you're going to keep bees to keep some antihistamines like Benadryl, maybe an EpiPen with you just in case of that too. But another option would be an herb that grows here. We have prickly lettuce, and that the white pulp that's in the middle of the stem that works pretty well. And bee stings, plantain. Anyway, other herbal remedies like that. But those are some of our favorites. Anything else?
My favorite pre-sting treatment is a bee smoker. My favorite post-sting remedy is a fingernail. Don't pinch the stinger to pull it out. You'll squish the poison sac and then squirt more venom in there. You scrape it out of there. So plantain is a good one. Yeah. And lavender oil. I keep a little bottle of lavender oil in my truck.
In case it gets them in the face.
Yeah, so if I get stung on the nose or the eye or something, then maybe I'll put some of that on there. Other than that, I don't worry about it too much. But do something. Be prepared to have. There's all kinds of things. There's pennies. Copper's supposed to work. I don't know. I'm not spreading. Let's see, mud.
It seems like we shouldn't tell people to put mud on it.
Why not? Mud can't hurt you.
It can get dirt in there. I don't know. Okay, you decided how you want to treat it, but okay. So those are some great things. Let's see. Another thing is somebody asked screened or solid bottom board. Does it matter with the seasons? Like, should I use the screened when it's hot and put the insert back when it's cold?
There's some of those bee pieces of bee equipment that just hang around forever, and there's always a question about which one's better. Screened bottom boards or solid bottom boards is one of them. So it's quite an involved discussion, I guess, for me to give you all the details about why I don't use screened bottom boards. So
he likes solid bottom boards.
I like solid bottom boards. And if we lived in the tropics, maybe we would use some screened bottom boards. But the bees like to be enclosed, and you've seen what they do with propolis. So if the bees could completely cover that bottom board screen with propolis, I think they would. I'm sure they would. That's just too big of a job for them. You've seen what they do to the entrance. They want to block that thing down, the upper entrance. They'll close it up. They want to cover the entire inside of the hive with propolis. They want to be enclosed, and they want to regulate their temperature and their humidity and protect themselves by having an enclosed hive. So let's say, for example, the temperature got up to 107 degrees. And I picked 107 degrees because that it has on a bunch of different occasions. I kind of keep a mental note about what's the high temperature we got to up during the summer. So they want the brood chamber to be 93, 94 degrees, and they want that temperature to remain very consistent. And they'll have trouble doing that. They'll have trouble evaporating water. They'll have trouble circulating the air more or less in the hive to keep that temperature and that humidity at the temperature they want it at if you've got a completely open hive on the bottom. So it's best for drawing comb out and for raising brood if the temperature is very consistent, and they'll keep it to the temperature they want in there. They can't do that with a screened bottom board.
Not to mention in the desert, it can be 107 in the day, but then at night it's going to drop. It could drop into the 60s, Yeah. It's a huge fluctuation of temperatures in the desert for them to have to quickly, modify. Yeah.
So bees are capable of adjusting. It could be really cool in the corners of the hive or at the bottom where it's drafty, and they can maintain the temperature they want right in the brood chamber. So when I say 94 degrees they want inside the hive, well, they want to keep that very consistent in the brood chamber. That doesn't mean they have to keep the entire hive that temperature, but it would be easier for them if they could. So solid bottom boards is what I use and what I recommend. However, having said that, there's some reasons that bees will do okay in screened bottom boards if that's what you prefer to use. So, but now you've got to help. You've got more to do if you're going to keep a screened bottom board. You got to make sure to put the slide in when it's too cold. Keep that in the wintertime, and then know just when to take it out in the spring and put it back in the fall. and it's just another thing for you to do, another thing for you to worry about. So I would recommend them.
Yeah, bees, the thing about bees is that they just like grow and they reproduce and they make honey. Like they want to do that, and so they will, but we try to give them optimal circumstances to do that. Okay, so if you want to know more about our reasons for solid versus screen bottom boards, our online course, My First Colony, talks a lot about that. He wrote a lot of details down, and so you're welcome to sign up for that course. That one's free, so sign up on our website and find that detailed kind of information about that. Okay, so Phil from Bluffdale says, any thoughts on the current trend of building hyper-insulated hives? So what he's talking about is when they have 2+ inches of styrofoam on the outside of the hive, and then sometimes people leave that on all year.
Yeah, so there comes the insulated part that's connected with what we were just previously saying about screen bottom boards, where you could insulate the entire hive sides and top and then leave a completely open on the bottom because it's a screen. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So yeah, the heat's up so inside the hive in the middle where the cluster is and up above the cluster. So maybe if you just insulate the top. Okay, so let me answer your question this way. Here's your answer. Yesterday, I'm going to give you a current report on what's going on in the beehives. I have some bees in the yard where there were some calves, and sometimes they like to rub on the hives. So I put a big rock, the biggest rock that I could pick up and put on top of that hive, and then a couple more just to make sure. So usually when I do that, they're really heavy. Then if the cow gets a rubbing on a little bit, it won't knock the lid off or separate the hive. So these are in double deeps. And the cows moved that just over enough, just a little bit. So there was a couple of inches on one side of the hive that was been exposed, and it's been that way most of the winter. And so my in-frame feeder happened to be there, and it was clear full of water. So most of the winter, I suppose that's been frozen, but it was liquid. So that's going to put the temperature up in the hive because they're getting rain and snow and water, feeder full of water. And they were in the top box, and they were doing just fine. They were just about out of honey. So this is just a regular 3/4 inch pine box, no insulation other than that big rock on top. There's nothing else on top, just a 3/4 inch plywood top on it. And the bees are in there doing just fine. So we haven't had a real severe winter, but it's been down cold enough for often enough and long enough that you think the bees would have a problem. So my point being that if your bees are good and healthy, if everything else is going right in the hive, then you really don't need that hyper insulation around your beehives. Now, having said that, where do you live? So if you live in Alaska, yeah, I know, right? We know that. But what I'm saying is, if you live in Alaska or Canada or Minnesota or Wyoming, then maybe you want. Well, not in Wyoming. We left the hive just plain old in its box, no wrapping at all. They did just fine in the winter. So there's lots more variables that go into getting bees through the winter, other than just an insulated hive. So if they have plenty of feed in there and they're healthy going into winter, that's the main thing. So look at, let me recommend, let's see if I can remember. He's in Vermont. Michael Palmer, how he wraps his bees. And it'll get 40 below up there, and the hives will be completely buried in the snow. And he's got just a thin layer of roofing felt tar paper around them. And he's a commercial beekeeper. That's what he does. So having said that, I think it's a good idea to maybe put something additional on the roof. If you want to put a little foam on top of the roof or something like that, that wouldn't be a bad idea. But let's see.
If you have a hyper-insulated hive, go ahead and use it.
Sure.
But it's just not, like bees will still build comb and they'll make honey in that hive too.
The laying hive I'm building right now, it's the plans on there recommend for 2x10s. So instead of a 3/4 inch wood wall around the hive, we'll have 1.5 inches. So we've we've doubled the insulation there. And most of the places that bees would be living in, if it's a hollow tree, it's going to have a pretty thick amount of wood around it. So there's more insulation. It'll help the bees to maintain the temperature, but what I'm saying is it isn't necessary. So don't go throwing away all your wood hives and think that you've got to buy something that's insulated in order to get them through winter.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things that can help, but it's if your bees are dead in the spring,
it's probably not
it's
because of that.
probably not because you didn't keep them in a double insulated styrofoam hive.
Mm-hmm. But if you want to try a double insulated styrofoam hive, that just because you think it's cool or fun, try it and see. Like, we're not down on someone else's equipment, but yeah, it's not.
Yep.
You don't have to have it, but if you just, part of the fun of beekeeping is trying out a whole bunch of new things and seeing what works for you, what you like and what you don't, and try it, see if you want to. But if it's like, maybe do a cost benefit analysis, if budget is a concern, maybe get something, you know, the wood boxes, maybe they're a little more economical. I'm not exactly sure about all the pricing, but if they are a little bit economical, it'll be enough for your bees.
Right. So we're while we're on the subject of types of hives, I'm gonna say a few more things. So I'm gonna try keeping bees in some more hives. I'm not changing the type of hives that I use. We're still using Langstroth primarily. So, but it's really fun to build your own hive. And I'm going looking up some of the old styles of hives that have long since gone out of favor, and building some of those. So currently, there's people that are keeping bees in Warray hives. Those are popular top bar hives, of course. And the Layens hive, that's another hive that's kind of trendy right now. And so I'm going to build some of these and put bees in them just for fun.
Yeah.
And we might. I've got an old hollow log. I'm going to work it out so that I can put frames that I can remove out of there. But we're going to keep them in a log hive too. So,
and I guess Stan's in the point of his career, like he's been doing this for like since 92 or something, 30 years. Anyway, he's at the point where he can just play and have fun and try some fun things, and you can too. Yeah. Okay. So Liz Harris says, can all types of frames go through an extractor? Okay.
Well, let's see. So the extractors, I don't know that anybody's made an extractor that fits anything other than the Langstroth top bar, so that you can put
Langstroth frame.
Langstroth frame with the Langstroth size top bar on the frame. Yeah, that's 19 inches. So there's shallows, there's mediums, and there's deeps. And I don't know if those jumbos would fit in some extractors. They might. But so if you have let's say you're keeping bees in a Layens hive, it's not going to fit in the extractor. I don't think. You can put it the other way around. But and then the Warray hives, they are a top bar, so those aren't going to work. So some of the older extractors have a basket in them rather than the radial type of frame. You still could put honeycomb in that, even if it was foundationless. But so when you're talking about frames, we've got plastic frames. Show the solid plastic frame.
Oh, yeah.
So this one's really durable because the foundation and the frame are all one size. That's no way that's going to separate. So if you were to put foundationless frame inside of a extractor, it might come out of there depending on how secure it is and how old it is. So no, all types of frames can't fit in the extractor exactly the same. All types of Langstroth frames can, and whether the foundation, the type of foundation, if you have any, will hold up under the force of the extractor. That's got some variables. Temperature also. So I have an old hand crank extractor. You have to stand there and turn the crank on it, and which is kind of nice if you've got a foundationless frame or one of my middle bar frame type of thing. Then you can start out very slowly. You just let it lose some weight first, let some of the honey come out of it first, and then you can speed it up a little bit. So most extractors have a little variable speed on the motor if it's motorized, that you can start out slowly if you're afraid of the comb honey in there separating from the frame. So
Yeah.
anyway, I hope that answered that one.
And so you got, just to clarify, the frame is here and then the comb is on it. And so what can happen is, especially if it's a deep frame with that's not supported by foundation or middle bars or wires or something, then the foundation can like buckle and come out in the tank of the extractor. And so then it lands in your honey and clogs things up. So yeah. Okay. And then another question is, do bees seem to have a preference on the types of frames?
Types of frames. They like plastic. So they would prefer the foundation, but the frame, I guess we'd be more specific about what you mean by preference. So the bees prefer to have a solid brood chamber. So if you had a bigger frame, the bigger the frame, the better for the brood. They would prefer that. But the frame itself, as far as wood or plastic or shape, no. So I would write us back if that didn't answer the question and you have something more specific about preference.
Yeah, clarify that one for us and we'll answer it.
Yeah.
But bees just want to build comb and they'll do it wherever they can.
Yeah. So their preference is no frames at all, please.
Okay. But we need to be able to have comb in a frame wherever we can, or a top bar we can remove from the hive, and we can inspect and make sure the queen's okay and make sure that there's not a disease and make sure they're making honey and expanding like they should. So we do need to have hives removable frames. It's actually the law.
I'm just saying that's what the bees wanted. I didn't tell anybody to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So just to be clear.
On purpose. We all do it accidentally. Oops. What happens when you leave a frame out of the hive?
They go rogue. Okay. So please ask us more questions. Oh, we have some more. Okay. She says, do bees prefer pure beeswax, foundationless, or foundation? Clarifying question.
Yeah. Okay. So they prefer space is what they want. Yeah. So they in essence, the bees might say to the beekeeper, if they could talk to us in our language, they would say, thanks for the frames and the foundation in there. But really, we know how to build comb, but so appreciate the offer, but just give us space really is what we want.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the second best, but the beekeeper might say, well, I've got some, I got to be able to get in there and manage things because the laws governing beekeeping tell me I have to have a removable frame.
Mm-hmm.
So how about if we compromise, bees? I'll give you pure beeswax. What do you think about that? And they'll say, okay, that's second best to space. And then if the beekeeper can't tolerate wiring frames and giving them wired frames, they could give them a removable frame in foundationless. So that way, we can keep the beekeeper and the bees happy. And then if the beekeeper has just got to be as efficient as possible, then next he's going to put in plastic. And if he doesn't put in coated plastic, wax coated plastic, the bees will say, no, sorry, the negotiations are off. We're not doing any of it. We're just going to either leave. Listen, we're going to swarm, or you're going to put some wax on that plastic if you want us to build it out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the way it goes if the bees could communicate with us.
So Liz, I just know a little bit more about your circumstances because we've been emailing. So if I were to advise you specifically for your circumstances, I would buy plastic foundation that's coated with beeswax. And that if you were someone different, that's okay. And maybe you'd have a different answer. But for Liz, that's what I would say. Hopefully that will be like, here's the bottom line. Just buy the plastic foundation. Yep. Anyway, it would just be the easiest to manage for you and your beekeeping partner, your kid. Okay, so if you have more questions, we are super happy to answer them. We may not get through all of the stuff that we had planned, which is great. What we want is for you to have a class that you want, and we'll get through what we can. And then next week, we'll just carry it over. So we have plenty of time to talk about what we need to talk about. So, okay. So we were going to talk about preparing your apiary. So getting ready to receive a colony of bees. Maybe it's your first colony of bees, or maybe you've tried it before, but like, what do you need to know to get ready for the bees to arrive? So the first thing you need to know is that different areas have different beekeeping licenses and code, like laws about where and how you can keep bees and things like that. So you need to check your local city, county, and state if you're in the United States. Check those regulations about beekeeping. You can just Google it and it will tell you what the rules are. In our area, beekeepers need an annual beekeeping license, and that's pretty common in a lot of states through the Department of Agriculture, and there's a fee for that. And then let's see, some other states, Utah doesn't require this, but we know Wyoming does. They require beekeepers to register their apiaries to keep just a considerate distance between apiaries. And then some cities have codes, like some cities, it's the law that unless somebody complains, you're allowed to have a beehive. So it's a good idea to take your neighbor jar of honey and help them like your bees, or maybe put them in a place where your neighbor isn't staring at them and worrying about them. Okay, so that is enough about that. That's the boring part. Okay, so we're going to talk about specific considerations about where you should put your hives. So these are not hard and fast rules. Bees want to have a spot and they want to have them. They will fly and they will make honey, but we want to maximize their effectiveness as much as possible. And we can pick some locations are better than others, right? So we have some things that we consider the most important factors in situating hives. And then we'll have some things that are less important, but if you can swing that, then the bees will appreciate it. So the first thing that bees need to have is that they need to be within a reasonable distance to nectar and pollen for the entire growing season. So that may or may not be on your property. And so you can find an apiary in a site with a bunch of different resources. Do you want to say anything about apiary locations?
When you need one, they appear. There's always somebody that is willing to put bees on their property in exchange for a little honey. That's kind of the standard in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
You pay your yard rent with some honey, and some people are happy to have the bees there just for pollination. They don't really care how much honey you give them. Other people's, you've got to sweeten the deal a little bit. So if you just put the word out that you need another place to put bees, and you'll find them.
Yep. There are lots of people that want bees, but don't have to do the work of being a beekeeper. So you can help with that. Mutually beneficial. Okay. So another thing that is really important in situating bees is that they like full sun. They like sun. So they want spots. Let's see, beehives in sunny spots produce more honey than bees in shady spots. At least in our area, there may be some really severe desert temperatures in southern Utah or Arizona, Nevada. Anyway, where maybe you need to give them a little shade. But in our area, they do better the more they have. So it can get, anyway, we won't talk about, we had, Stan tells the story, but we had an apiary in Provo at our old house where we had a line of beehives along the fence, and he would talk about how the bees, where the sun hit when the sun hit the porch of that hive in the morning, they would get out and get to work faster than the ones down the line that are in the shade longer in the morning. And that hive on the end, where it was warmer faster in the morning, would make more honey. So more honey means better winter survival and other stuff. And then if you think about insects, they like it where it's hot, right? If you think about areas of the world where insects do the best, like those places are generally pretty hot and humid. Okay. I don't know if I want to give them chances to talk.
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay. So another thing, when you're situating hives, it's a really good idea to place your hives on a hive stand. So that doesn't have to be an official piece of equipment that you buy. It can be like it could be a pretty thing, like the White House has really pretty hive stands, for example. But it could be just like cinder blocks or a wood pallet, that like an old shipping pallet, or just something to elevate it a little bit so that the entrance of the hive is not coming out directly onto the dirt. And there's a couple reasons for that. First, if your hive, the bottom board of your hive is sitting on the dirt, then it will decompose a little bit faster. And also, a lot of the world has skunks, and beehives tend to attract skunks. They like to eat bees. And if we elevate the hive just a little bit off the ground, then the skunks can't eat them as easily, because the skunk strategy is to dig in the dirt right in front of the hive. The bees come out, they smash them with their claws, and they eat them, right? So if you don't like to trap skunks, then elevate your hives and you can skip some of that, right? Yeah.
Why wouldn't they like to trap skunks?
Do you remember that time when we were gonna go dancing and you didn't come because the skunk sprayed, and you had the doors of your hive open?
Yep,
and the skunk fumes like filled the whole truck.
The wind blew right in my direction. I thought I was far enough away. Okay.
Anyway, trapping skunks is hard. Okay. So another thing is that boxes need to be roughly level. Okay. So saying that, like, if it's, you don't have to like get out your level and like make it perfect. You can if you're an engineer and just love that, but it doesn't have to be perfectly level. But if your hive is obviously tilted, then what happens is within that hive, the frames will stay with gravity and the hive will go like this. So then your bees build combs in like wonky ways. So you want it to be more or less level.
That's most important if you're starting out, especially with foundationless frames. Once the bees have built the comb out to the length they desire, then it's really not a problem. So I don't get too carried away with it. Just eyeball it and get it roughly level.
Yep.
Plumb is the most important. If it's tipping forward a little bit, that's okay, because any water that runs inside the hive, it won't run to the back of the hive. It'll drain out the front.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So another thing that we consider a more important factor in situating hives is that we want to put hives in places where there is not a lot of foot traffic. So, for example, you probably would not want to face the entrance of a hive pointing to your kid's swing set, because then it will increase the kid-bee interactions, right? So the same thing with like an alleyway where people are walking, or a sidewalk. You don't want the entrance pointing so that the bees are interacting with people more. If you can turn the hive away from that, like maybe the hive entrance faces a fence, so the bees have to fly up and out, and they don't interact with people as much in their flight path, right? Anything? Yeah.
I'm just thinking of neighbors. We had a place for bees, and they had their trampoline. The kids were jumping on the tramp right on the other side of the fence where the bees were, which worked out fine. It was never really any problem, because the fence was at least tall enough so the bees had to go up and over, so they're higher than the activity right next to them. Mm-hmm. And that alleviated a lot of problems.
Yeah, bees, when bees are foraging, they're not aggressive, but we have, like my daughter, when she was a toddler, I remember carrying her past a beehive and one landed on her face. And so she, swatted at it and it got her right in the eye. It wasn't aggressive, but it just got her. It was a painful sting and she was really young. So I remember that as a new mama, I was like, worried about it. But anyway, we could have avoided that by not walking through their flight path. Yeah. Okay. So some things that are less important factors in situating hives, but if you can like avoid them or do them, then it will help the bees' success a little bit more. The first one is to notice the prevailing wind direction in your area and put your hive so that the wind isn't blowing straight into the entrance of the hive, especially in the winter, because that can chill the bees a little bit more. You can add a windbreak if you do need to face them that way. Another example is if you're at the bottom of a canyon, you wouldn't want all that canyon wind blowing up through your hive or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
Face them south.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the bees prefer. So there's been some studies done on feral bees living in trees, which direction they like to face their entrance. So, of Quite often, though, in the wintertime, we get winds that are coming from the south or southwest. So, you know, you kind of do what you can. You can put up a windbreak, still facing south, but put up a little windbreak for them. Anyway.
So, of course, facing them south in the northern hemisphere, if you happen to live in the southern hemisphere, then you'd get more sun if you face them north, right? When we face them south, what happens is that the colony gets sun on the porch, you know, from the east direction and kind of the southeast direction through the summer. So it warms them up and they get right to work in the morning. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Multiple hives. Somebody just asked a question as they're purchasing bees to me yesterday. They were asking, how far apart do I need to put the hives? We're getting 2 package bees. How far apart can I put them? So once the bees are established in their colonies, so you're not worried about them drifting right upon installation of that package, then you can put them right next to each other. So commercial beekeepers will put bees on pallets. So there's 4 of them that are right touching each other. And there's even 6-way pallets. So you'll have 3 on one side, 3 on the other. So I don't recommend that. That's a little bit too close. So it's easy to keep the bees. I like to put them on 2-way pallets is my favorite way. So, and then there's some space in between the pallets so that I can walk around the hive. But right next to each other is okay.
Yep. And it's okay if they're like different breeds of bees. Like a question we get actually pretty often, multiple times every year is, can I put like a Carniolan queen next to a Pharaoh queen next to a Russian queen? Yes, they establish their own territories and it's okay to put them next to each other. And the breed, it won't cause any problems to put them by each other.
I'm not sure. We get that question a lot. So I'm gathering there's some bee influencers out there. There's some bee books or something that's saying that the different varieties of bees will fight with each other and you shouldn't have them mix in the apiary. That's just my guess. I don't know it. I haven't heard of it. If you have a reference for me, I usually try to keep up on all these things and I'm aware of the trends and the latest questions and whatnot, but I don't know where that's coming from for sure. So if somebody out there knows, let me know.
But we've been hearing that for a good 20 years. So if you know where that's coming from, but it's okay. They'll be nice to, I mean, they'll fight it out. They'll have their little territorial battles and then they'll be done and they'll be fine next to each other. Okay. We'll talk about drift more next week. Okay. So another thing is to make sure, well, if your area has a good air drainage, so it's not in like a cold spot, or a floodplain, that would be ideal if it doesn't get flooded out and it's not in that, like a hollow, a cold spot. That if you if you're putting bees on a hillside, you want them up a little bit on the hillside instead of at the bottom in that cold spot. Okay. Another factor is privacy. We mentioned this a little bit before, but if you're in an urban setting, especially like if you're in the city, you might want to put your hives somewhere where other people don't see them. So some neighbors really do get worried about having beehives in the area and, out of sight, out of mind, right? But if their kids get stung, they know you have bees, they see your beehive acting, like sometimes the gears in their mind just turn and they kind of get really worried about it, maybe even a little obsessed about your bees. And there's no way to know whose bee stung, a kid. It might be something from your colony, even if it's next door. It might not. What did your grandpa always say?
Well, he would ask him if the bees were wearing little striped shorts because all his bees had little striped shorts. So, that's how he could identify his bees. So.
Anyway, but just out of sight, out of mind. So if you can, tuck them away in a place in the backyard where your neighbor isn't, sitting on their patio watching your bees all the time, if they're worried about it, right? Some neighbors are nice and love bees and some people are worried about them, right?
Bears, should we talk? Oh, livestock next. What are we talking about?
Yeah. Oh, do you want to talk about access?
Yeah. So if you're going to move bees much at all, like I do, if you're a hobbyist, you may never move them, which is what I recommend. Bees ought to just stay put. But if you have to move them and you've got them on somebody else's property, make sure you work out access to those bees late at night. So, because you'll show up, you get prepared to move some bees, and then you get there and the driveway's blocked, or the gate's closed, or they're wondering who's in the backyard or out on their property at 1 a.m. when you're moving bees. So that's one thing to consider.
So, and that's something that, I don't know, when friends talk to me about like our husband's jobs or whatever, people don't realize that there are beekeeping tasks that have to happen after dark. And in the middle of the summer, that's really late at night. So sometimes Stan can't even start a task until 10, 11 at night in the summertime. And sometimes he's out all night doing that kind of things. So it happens all hours. You want to be able to access your hives when you need to. So get a key to the lock or whatever you need to access them. Livestock can bother hives, right? So goats, if you like goats, they tend to jump on top of the hive. They think it's like king of the mountain and think it's fun to do that. And sometimes the hive is sturdy enough for that. Sometimes it can tip over. Horses can kick the hives. We've had some broken boxes from horses kicking them. The bees made it, right?
Yeah, it depends on what time of year they kick them over. Mm-hmm. So I've lost some bees. So some horses are smart. They'll get stung once on the nose and then not bother them. Mm-hmm. Some take an issue with the bees. I guess they got a little feud going. I don't know. It depends on your horse. Mm-hmm. So, and cows we mentioned earlier, I just had...
they like to rub
on. Yeah, they like rubbing on the hive, so they'll flip the lid off. I've even had deer walking around the hives, and I don't think they're curious to hide, but just walking, have some by a path, and they'll knock the lid off a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I've had a deer kill a couple of colonies one time.
You want the lids to stay on the boxes in the winter.
Yeah.
That's just
right.
Okay. So chickens and bees are usually fine together. They're happy. And we haven't ever kept bees with like camelids, like llamas or alpacas or camels or something like that. If you have, tell us, did they do okay with bees, or do they have any kind of do they have any interest there? Tell us. We want to know.
I don't know if ducks or geese will eat bees or not. I don't know.
Yeah, chickens and bees are fine. They, when the mortuary bees drop the dead ones, the chickens will just eat them. But
yeah, I had some roosters one time that weren't afraid to eat yellow jackets, but I never saw them eating any bees. Mm-hmm. They do like to eat the larvae, though. If you have a bunch of drone larvae that you're cutting out, the chickens like to eat those, but they won't eat the adults.
Yeah, they'll peck out the larvae, though, if you're doing like varroa testing or something. Okay. And then, so if you do need to if you have like a small farm or a property where bees and livestock are going to interact, it's a smart idea to put like fences or panels around those hives to kind of protect them and keep the two a little bit separate.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Bears?
Yep. Talk about bears.
So there's a picture here of a rooftop. This was our cabin. And we happen to have a flat roof on it. So that was good in the wintertime for jumping off the top of the cabin on the snowmobile. And in the wintertime, we put bees on there. That solved the bear problem. So it would be easier, though, to have an electric fence. That would be the best solution for bears. Or maybe even easier yet, if you have the option, just don't put them in a place where there's bears at. But I've only lost one little nuke to bears so far. Depends on where you live. You might have trouble with bears. Depends on where you keep your bees.
So yeah, these ones are on the rooftop. Here's another rooftop picture. Another thing you've suggested in the past is that you could put them in a stock trailer. Did you say that just now?
Yeah, there's other ways you could, even if you had them on a flatbed open, you can put a chain over the top of them so the bear can't rip the lid off. But they'll chew on them and it's pretty tough on your equipment. Mm-hmm. So you could put them in a enclosed trailer. That's another option. So
with windows, something like that, or a honey house instead. Okay.
I've got a camp trailer. I'm thinking of it's an old gutted 1970 something camp trailer. I'm thinking of drilling holes in the sides of it so the bees would be inside the trailer and they could fly out. So if a bear was determined, though, he could tear the siding off of an old camp trailer. They're not that sturdy.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's just a few ideas about bears.
We'd be liable for teaching that bear how to open trailers, probably then too. We don't want that. Okay, we talked about skunks a little bit, that we want to elevate our hives a little bit, and that will help with the skunk issues. You can, yeah. And then the last thing is vibrations. We should talk about that, because when you're have bees, and maybe you're in an urban area and the bees are near your lawn, bees don't love vibrations. So by vibrations, I mean the lawnmower.
Yeah.
So equipment vibrations may agitate the bees. And so if you need to use tractors, heavy machinery, lawnmowers near those hives, they might come find you and not be happy. So you can wear a bee suit when you're doing those tasks, like mowing your lawn, or you could put the bees away from that enough that the vibrations won't bother them, like in a wild area, maybe of the yard. So, okay. So we went through a lot of resources. I'll link after, probably tomorrow, I'll add a link to our guide that comes from our book called Beekeeping Printables. There's a page in here that we call Preparing the Apiary. So I'll link to that so you can just kind of look at that and have a list of these factors that we talked about tonight. But get your book, Beekeeping Printables. It's on our website, thehoneycompany.com. I'll put that link real quick so you can see it. It's in our shop, so find that there. And this is the book. It's kind of thin, but the PDF version has about 200 pages of different awesome resources. It's a really good value for what you get. And you can find it there, and we'll link it to our show notes. And if you sign up for our online courses, you can get all of those printables for free too, or they're included anyway. I have some quiz questions about where to place your bees. And then you guys probably have some specific questions about where to put bees in your yards. Like some people they want to ask us things like, I have a garden area and I have a trampoline area, and which one is the best place for my bees? So if you have situational questions about that, please ask us, because that's what we're here for. Okay. So while we're thinking about comments like that, we're going to do a quiz. So how this works is we'll read the question on the air, and then if you're watching live, you answer in the comments, and if you're answering not live, you answer in the comments too, so you can see how you did on our quiz. Okay, so this one, the way that the program that we're using works, it kind of breaks them up. We can only have so many characters per question, so this one will have A, B, C, D, and E, and they'll be in different strips. So which of the following is true? So you're picking one that's true. A, I can put colonies next to each other even if they are different varieties, like Carniolans can go next to Italians. Okay, B, it's okay if your apiary is very far from nectar sources. They don't really need nectar. Okay, C, colonies prefer full shade to full sun. And then D, it's okay to put colonies near high traffic areas like swing sets or sidewalks. The bees won't bother anyone. And then E, it is best to face the hives north in the northern hemisphere. Okay, so we'll go through those again. Answer in the comments A, B, C, D, or E. So A was, I can put colonies next to each other even if they are different varieties. B is, it's okay to be far from nectar sources. C is, colonies prefer full shade. D is, you should put colonies next to high traffic areas. And E, it's best to face hive north in the northern hemisphere. So let's see.
These are all true or false.
Well, they're all you pick the one that's true.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So answer in the comments. We'll give you a second, and then we will tell you the answer.
All right. So while you're answering those questions on the quiz, let me put in a suggestion about beekeeping equipment and do-it-yourself beekeeping equipment. So lots of beekeepers like to build their own equipment. They like to customize it, make it their own, invent it. There's a lot of beekeepers that are inventors. That's part of the hobby, and I'm trying to encourage that. It's been going on since Langstroth came up with the movable frame hive back in 1851. And it got to the point where there's a lot of competition and even some heated competition about designing hives and pieces of beekeeping equipment. So even though some of that back then was a little bit fierce and competitive, it resulted in some wonderful new products that we have. The bee smoker and extractors and lots of different hive designs. Mm-hmm. So if you've invented some gadget, or maybe it's a full-on hive, if you've modified a piece of equipment in some way, we want to hear about it. So tell us about what you've done and how it works better for you, and maybe send us some pictures and a description of it. And we're going to talk about in the future on our podcasts about different hive designs and different pieces of hive equipment that you've come up with.
Okay. So, yep. Awesome. Please send us. We'd love to see that. And I think that something that would be cool in the future is to maybe even have some of you who are inventors on here as a guest, and you can share, we could get you on camera on your end and we'll be on camera on our end, and you can share some of those modifications. That would be really cool. Okay. So the answer for our quiz question right here, which of the following is true? So the one that's true is A. I can put colonies next to each other, even if they are different varieties. That's okay to do. So B, we of course need our colonies near nectar sources. They do need nectar. So that one is false. C, colonies prefer full sun, not full shade. So that one's false. D, you need to put hives away from high traffic areas so that you can keep them and not have nuisance clause pulled on you in the neighborhood. So that one's false. And E, it's best to face hives south, not north. So that one's false too. Okay. This is the next question is, we just have 2 questions right now. Which of the following is, we did not talk about water sources yet. Okay, so we're not going to do that one yet.
Bees need water within a quarter mile is the general rule. Mm-hmm. They'd rather go shorter than that. So the reason bees need the shortest trip to pick up water is because they're going to use their honey crop to fly the water back to the hive. So if they're picking up propolis or they're picking up pollen, then they put that on their back legs and bring it back. So when they bring back nectar, though, it goes in their honey crop, and water, they use their honey crop to bring that back to the hive. Mm-hmm. So if they were bringing back nectar and it was too far to go and it was too stiff of a wind and they got caught in a rainstorm, that bee would be okay for until a day later, because it's got a honey crop full of honey that it could use.
You can just take some of those nutrients and use them for energy.
It packed a lunch for itself, essentially, so it could sustain itself while it was out on a longer trip further away from home, but not the case with water. So they want the water close by. Don't put it directly in front of the hive. Put it on the other side of your yard or the other side of the garden. But if you have some neighbors that are going to be likely or worried about bees, they have a swimming pool, they've got a water feature that your bees are going to get into, then make sure you've got water out for your bees. Otherwise, the complaints will go up.
Mm-hmm. So the water sources, or kind of what we say is the water source needs to be close to the hive. It needs to have grip. So something that the bees can land on and be able to take off from. And then it needs to be knee deep to the bees. So I thought we'd share tonight some cool water sources that we've seen over the years. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. Maybe. Okay, so here's one. This is a bee water sources. Up here, this was a sprinkler that's broken, and then the water started dripping over this rock. So I don't know if you can see, but these little dots here, those are bees getting a little drink. We used to call that the bee spa. It's at his mom's house. So they had this really nice place to get a drink of water, and they could land, get the drink, and then take off. Okay. So another one that we like to recommend is, this is a chicken waterer. And so we've which is nice because you fill this tank once, and then the water comes out into this dish around, and so you don't have to refill it as often, right? If we did, it would be too deep for the bees to land. It's not knee deep for bees, except that we put this gravel at the bottom of the tray here so that the bees can land on the rocks, they can get a drink, and then they can fly away without getting their wings wet. So those are a couple ones. Oh, this is another idea that Stan had. This is a watering tank, and he had these old combs. This is not mold. This is just old wax. Anyway, he floated those in a water trough, and the bees can land on this plastic foundation. They float really well, and they can get a drink of water out of one of their little wax cups there, and then they can take off. So that's another good one too. Any other waterers that you wanted to tell
that
about?
particular water, you're looking at that picture of there, I finally gave up in that neighborhood. I didn't have to. We were there first, but we had a bunch of newly constructed homes that some of them were putting in swimming pools. And so the city started getting a lot of complaints about bees in their swimming pools. And so rather than fight with them, I just moved the bees. I could fight with them and win if I wanted, but how much energy do you have?
Yeah.
How important it is for you to be right about that particular thing. Well, if it's your only location, then maybe you do something about it. But another conflict, I guess it wasn't real bad, but we were keeping bees in the orchards in Santa Cruz, Utah, and there's hundreds of acres in orchard trees, cherries mostly around that area. And somebody moved in to the middle of the orchard and built their house. And when all the bees come in for the springtime, then they showed up at their bird waters, their
bird baths.
Yeah. So, what do you want us to do? Yeah, you've got bees in your bird bath. Sorry.
We try to be good neighbors, and but it's anyway, bird baths, bees are very attractive to it. Sometimes they're tricky if they're really deep, because they're not knee deep to the bees. They can drown a lot of bees too.
Yeah.
So if there's a perch on the side, or if you put rocks in there, then you can use a bird bath for to water bees, but you don't want open water.
Yeah. So generally, a soft answer is better than conflict. So when it's not an option to move the bees or solve it in another way, like that one was, you just be as polite as you can, give them a jar of honey, say, sorry, but the bees won't be there. It won't be a problem forever. So thanks for your cooperation and your consideration.
Yep. Okay, so the bee water sources. Okay, now we'll do the quiz question about that, because I forgot that we hadn't talked about it yet. Okay, so which of the following is not a good water source for honeybees? So again, you'll answer this in the comments, whether you're watching live or if you're watching after, and we'll see if you got it right. So which of the following is not a good water source for honeybees? A chicken waterer with rocks in it. B, a broken sprinkler. C, a 4-inch deep bird bath. That is assuming it has open water. Or D, a rock wall with water running over it. So let's see. We'll check the comments and see. Okay. We'll answer that question in just a second, Liz. Okay. So give you a second. Answer this quiz question in the comments, and then we'll answer Liz's question too. Okay, so the answer is the one that's not a good water source for honeybees would be a 4-inch deep bird bath with open water. And the reason it doesn't work is that you need rocks, or you need a grip for them to land and take off, and then it needs to be knee deep for them to not drown in it. Okay, so that's our quiz question. Let me remove that one and then go to this comment. So Liz asks, let's see. You mentioned in a previous episode not to put the water source too close to the hive. Why? And she has a backyard, so she is across the yard. Okay.
Yeah. So bees like to take the hive debris, dead bees, and also they go on their cleansing flight outside. So if there's flowers right in front of the hive, or a water source directly in front of the hive, then the bees might drop other dead bees in it. So they want to go a certain ways away from the hive to get away from any problems in the hive. Let's say, for example, chalk brood. If the bees are kicking out some larvae that has died from chalk brood, they'll be out in front. They'll try to carry them and drop them away from the hive, fly them away as far as they can. But there's a certain distance right around the hive that there's possibility of disease to be spread, and so the bees don't typically like. It's not like a pet dog or a cat where you're going to put their water bowl and their food bowl right in front of them. We don't want to do that with bees. So it'll keep any potential for spreading disease away from the hive if it's a little bit different. So the bees instinctively know that, and so they like to forage a little ways away from the hive. I mean, we're talking about a few feet anyway. So just don't put it right directly in front of the hive. Put it on the other side of the garden that's, 10, 20 feet away.
Mm-hmm. So there's like clean water.
Yeah, so it's clean. So, so the bees aren't drinking their own bath water.
And remember the bees, we don't tell them where to go. We don't tell them what water source to use. We try to give them one that's really convenient so that they use that instead of like the neighbor's pool or whatever. But we can't tell them where to go. And so other hives may come and drink out of the same water, or maybe your bees are drinking out of your neighbor's bee water and their bees are drinking out of yours. You don't know. But we want to keep that water source clean and not spread diseases that way too.
Right.
And maybe you have 2 colonies, or maybe you just have 1, but if someone were to have more than 1 colony, they may share the same water as well and want to, just keep the water clean. Right. Yeah. Awesome.
All right. If there's no more questions, maybe we're to the point of wrapping it up.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us tonight. And we're so grateful that you come and watch our videos, and hopefully these are really helpful to you. If you have more questions for us, you're welcome to ask them live next week, February 29th. How to manage your new colony will be our topic. But if you have questions between now and then, feel free to email them to us, or you can ask them live that night. But our email is info@thehoneycompany.com. And then be sure to check out our website, thehoneycompany.com. And we have a lot of great things. We have an online shop where you can purchase things from us. We have online courses that are really valuable if you enjoy these sessions, and those courses kind of take it a step farther and then really help you get the skills necessary to be successful at bees. And then our book, Beekeeping Printables, is available on our shop on the website as well. We recommend that book. It's a really useful guide to help you with your bees. It has lots of years of experience and questions answered.
Thanks for joining us. I'll see you again soon.
Okay, bye.